We're continuing looking at prayer as an aspect of worship. And we're doing that by looking at some of the Old Testament prayers, some of the great prayers that I believe virtually lay down a pattern for us on how we ought to pray. And because our prayers are often much quicker, much more superficial perhaps, than they ought to be, these prayers really help us to understand how we should be praying. And so we're going to turn to Nehemiah today to look at another kind of praying, public praying. The last 2 days we've looked at public prayer as celebration. David is ready to build a temple. Solomon's going to build it. He's dedicating that temple and he's praying and praising God and thanking God and making petitions to God and blessing God. All that happened publicly in prayer. Now we're turning to Nehemiah. Nehemiah is also offering a wonderful prayer here. And as he does so, he is coming before the Lord in a time of sorrow, a time of confession, a time in some ways of lament because of the failures of the people of God. And so this is also a public prayer. We don't like praying like that. We often leave out things like confession, admitting that we have done wrong, admitting that we've sinned, sorrowing over that. But I think the Psalms there's more lament type of Psalms than there are praise Psalms. And so it's a good pattern. We need to lament publicly our failures before God. And so we have this pattern here. And I'm going to read a lot in this wonderful, very long prayer, starting in chapter 9, verse 5. And so I hope you have your Bibles. You'll need your Bibles to really get the most out of this. And we find that as Nehemiah prays here, that he is actually praying worship to begin with. He's gathered the people of Israel. This is a public prayer, verse 1. And they rose up to pray. And then it isn't actually Nehemiah who's praying. It is Jeshua, who's one of the priests of the people, the high priest at this time. And Jeshua is the one leading them in prayer, verse 4. And he's gathered together the Levites on a platform. And we drop down to verse 5 when he says this, "Rise up, bless Yahweh your God from everlasting to everlasting." So he is calling for the whole assembly to bless God who is eternal. And then he begins his prayer. And he begins, again, much like David did, in worship. So I want to worship together in prayer, starting with verse 5, going all the way through verse 15. So please follow me with that. It says, "Oh, may your glorious name be blessed and exalted above all blessing and praise. You alone are Yahweh, or the Lord. You have made the heavens. The heaven of heavens are with all their host, the earth and all that is in it, the seas and all that is in them. You gave life to all of them, and the heavenly host bows down to you." So he praises God for creation of the earth, the heavens, and people, and the heavenly host. Verse 7, "You are Yahweh God. You chose Abram, and you chose him out of the Ur of the Chaldeans, and you gave him the name Abraham. You found his heart faithful before you and cut a covenant with him, and you gave him the land of the Canaanite, and the Hittite, and the Amorite, and the Perizzite, and the Jebusite, and the Gerasarites, and you gave it to his seed, and you have established your promise, for you are righteous." And so he is praising God for his provisions to Abram. I probably butchered a couple of those names going through there. And Abram would be the father of a chosen race of people, people blessed by God who would come into the land of Canaan and be given this promised land. So he praises God for that. And then in verse 9, "You saw the afflictions of our fathers in Egypt." Now he fast forwards all the way to the time of Moses and the Exodus, "and heard the cry by the Red Sea. Then he performed signs and wonders against Pharaoh and against all of his servants, all the people of this land, of his land. For you knew that they acted presumptuously toward you and made a name for yourself as it is this day. You split the sea before them, so they passed through the midst of the sea on dry land. And their pursuers you cast into the depths like a stone into mighty waters. And with a pillar of cloud you led them by day, and with a pillar of fire by night to the land for the light for them to go that way in which they were to go. Then you came down to Mount Sinai, and you spoke with them from heaven, from the upright judgments and the true laws, and good statutes and commandments. And he made known to them your holy Sabbath. And he commanded them commandments, statutes, and laws by the right hand, by the hand of your servant Moses. You gave them bread from heaven for they were hungry, and you brought forth water from a rock for them, for they were thirsty. And you said to them to enter in order to possess the land which you spoke, which you swore to give them. So he covers the whole Exodus scene, the wandering in the wilderness, with this prayer and praising God for all of his provisions that he had done for these people for all these years. What a way to begin a prayer. Prayer of worship, a prayer of thanksgiving. But there's much more to this prayer that we'll pick up on tomorrow. Once he has praised God, he now moves forward with other things. We'll look at this tomorrow.